Have you noticed something strange? In a world where more people are talking than ever before, fewer seem to be thinking. There's a kind of noise that drowns out thought, not the sound of voices, but the sound of distraction, the constant ping of stimulation, the endless scroll of opinions that feel like information but leave you emptier, more confused. I want you to sit with one uncomfortable question. When was the last time you had a truly original thought? Not one borrowed from a podcast, a YouTube short, a comment section, or a trending idea, but a thought that came from your silent reflection, your lived experience, your inner clarity. If it's hard to answer that, you're not alone. Nietzsche once said, "He who thinks most deeply loves what is most alive." If that's true, then what does it say about us now? Are we still alive in the deepest sense? Or are we merely reacting, echoing, mimicking? The collapse of thinking doesn't look like chaos. It looks like busyness. It looks like 10 open tabs and no direction. It looks like confidence without understanding. We live in a time that rewards speed, not depth, efficiency, not insight. We scroll through hundreds of ideas a day, but rarely stop to wrestle with even one. And here's where it gets dangerous. When you stop thinking deeply, you don't just lose clarity, you lose sovereignty. You become programmable. You adopt the values of those who shout the loudest. You mistake noise for truth. We're trained to consume information like fast food, quick, tasty, addictive, but not nourishing. And as that habit grows, we lose our capacity for solitude, for contemplation, for doubt. But thinking begins with doubt. It begins when you pause and say, wait, is this actually true?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
I want you to imagine a child asking, why is the sky blue? That's a sacred moment. It's the birth of philosophy. But what happens next often determines whether that flame grows or dies. If we say, don't ask so many questions or just Google it, we kill the spirit of wonder. And that's what society has been doing, slowly killing wonder and replacing it with distraction. The silent collapse of thinking begins in childhood, when imagination is replaced by standard answers, when silence is labeled as boredom, when we're rewarded for repeating instead of exploring. We say we want smart children, but we often mean compliant ones. We want thinkers, but we're afraid of those who think too much. Why? Because deep thought threatens structures. It questions the rules. It exposes the absurdities we've normalized. Here's a terrifying thought. What if society doesn't want you to think? Not because of some grand conspiracy, but because deep thinking leads to disruption, and disruption is inconvenient. People who think deeply are hard to govern, hard to sell to, hard to manipulate. They ask, why should I buy this? Why should I follow this rule? Why does this system exist in the first place? That kind of mind is dangerous in a world built on passive consumption. So instead, we're flooded with just enough surface-level content to feel informed, but not transformed. We're taught what to think, not how to think. And slowly the muscles of the mind begin to atrophy. Not because they're weak, but because they've been unused. Just like a body shrinks from lack of movement, the mind shrinks from lack of real questions. So let me ask you this, when was the last time you sat in silence, no phone, no music, no conversation, and just followed a thought as far as it would go? No agenda, no productivity hack, just you, your mind, and the long road of inquiry. Most people avoid this because silence is uncomfortable. It reveals how noisy the mind has become. But silence is the birthplace of thought. It's where clarity is born. And in a collapsing world of noise, silence is now a radical act. If you want to reclaim your mind, start there. Not with more content, but with less. Not with more answers, but with better questions. Because the truth is, we're not just losing the ability to think, we're losing the courage to think. And that, more than anything, is what's unraveling us. The age of echoes. How originality died and imitation took its place. We live in the age of echoes. It's not that people don't speak, it's that most of what's spoken has already been said. Again and again and again, you can feel it. Scroll through a social feed, listen to a conversation, watch a debate, and you'll notice it's not really thinking. It's repetition, it's tribal language, it's borrowed outrage, recycled opinions, fashionable cynicism. And this raises a question we rarely ask. When did originality become dangerous? Somewhere along the way, society stopped valuing the thinker and started worshiping the influencer. We began to mistake visibility for wisdom, followers for truth, and virality for meaning. And in doing so, we traded the sacred art of thought for the shallow performance of imitation. Platonic philosophy warns us about this phenomenon. Plato said most people live in a cave, staring at shadows cast on a wall, believing those shadows are reality. In today's world, those shadows are algorithms. They show us what they want us to see, not what we need to see. And here's the kicker. We're addicted to them. The more we absorb, the less we explore. The more we imitate, the less we create. This is why so many people feel lost. It's not because they lack talent or intelligence. It's because they've never been taught to trust their own mind. They've been trained to echo, not to inquire. Originality didn't die naturally. It was smothered by fear, by ridicule, by a system that rewards conformity and punishes divergence. Let me ask you something risky. If you had a thought that went against everything your community, your politics, your family, or your online tribe believed, would you still speak it? That's the real test. Not how many facts you know, but how much truth you can carry when it costs you something. Thinking isn't just a mental act, it's a moral one. It demands integrity. It demands that you risk rejection in pursuit of reality. But today, truth is often less important than being accepted. And so we self-censor, we imitate, we become safe, harmless, prédictable, and slowly the mind becomes domesticated. Not free range and wild like it was meant to be, but trained like a pet that no longer bites. Nietzsche warned of this too. He saw the rise of what he called the last man, the creature of comfort, who avoids pain, avoids depth, avoids thinking because thinking leads to discomfort. The last man doesn't want truth. He wants peace. He wants entertainment. He wants likes. And the tragedy is, he thinks he's free. But Nietzsche would say, real freedom begins when you stop echoing and start creating, when you stop mimicking and start becoming. But to do that, you must be willing to stand alone, to risk being misunderstood, to think thoughts that no one else claps for. That's the price of originality, and most aren't willing to pay it. And yet, here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to fit in, you start to come alive. The moment you stop echoing, you hear your own voice. And it's there, not in the noise, but in the silence, that original thought is born. It doesn't come on demand. It doesn't shout. It whispers. And if you're quiet enough, still enough, brave enough, you'll hear it. You'll start to see the world differently, not as a script to follow, but as a canvas to paint. You'll realize that the greatest thinkers of history didn't have special minds, they had free ones, and that freedom is still available. But only if you're willing to stop echoing and start thinking. reclaiming the mind how to think again in a world that forgot how. So where do we go from here? If we've become echo chambers, if distraction has drowned our depth, and society has rewarded mimicry over meaning, how do we begin to think again? The answer is not grand. It's not glamorous. It begins with something so unfashionable in the modern world that it almost sounds rebellious: thinking slowly. In a world obsessed with speed, slow thought is an act of defiance. It means pausing before reacting. It means sitting with a question for days, weeks, maybe years. It means being okay with not knowing. In fact, it means honoring not knowing as the birthplace of wisdom. Socrates, arguably the father of Western philosophy, was the wisest man in Athens, not because he had the most knowledge, but because he admitted how little he knew. That's the starting point. Not confidence, not opinion, but humility. But humility isn't enough. We also need courage. The courage to think for ourselves when it's easier to outsource our beliefs. The courage to face uncomfortable truths without numbing them with distraction. The courage to contradict what we used to believe because growth demands it. Real thinking is not a comfortable process. It tears down what you've built. It challenges your identity. It forces you to confront the fact that many of your convictions were given to you, not chosen by you. But in that destruction, something miraculous happens. You begin to rebuild. Not on borrowed foundations, but on truth you've earned. Not inherited ideas, but forged ones. Not borrowed light, but fire you lit yourself. Let me offer you something practical. One way to begin reclaiming your mind is through deep questioning. Don't just ask, "What do I think?" Ask, "Where did this thought come from? What assumptions am I making? Whose voice is speaking in my head right now, mine or someone else's?" Practice thinking like a philosopher, not a consumer. Take a common belief like money equals success or productivity equals worth and trace it to its root. Who taught you that? What if it's not true? What if the opposite is true? When you start doing this regularly, your mind begins to return to its natural state, not reactive, but reflective. Not passive, but powerful. And something incredible happens. The fog begins to lift. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop being afraid of disagreement. You become intellectually anti-fragile, stronger through challenge, not weaker. You begin to notice how rare real thinking is. You begin to crave silence. You begin to value solitude. And eventually, you reach a place that few ever find. A place where your mind is your own. Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. And that, in a world full of noise, is the rarest form of wealth. Because when your mind is your own, no one can manipulate you. No one can sell you empty meaning. No one can rent space in your head without your permission. You become sovereign. And in a collapsing culture, sovereignty is salvation. So I'll leave you with this. Thinking is not a luxury. It's a responsibility, a moral one. Because your thoughts shape your actions and your actions shape the world. When you think clearly, you live clearly. When you think deeply, you act intentionally. And when you reclaim your mind, you reclaim your life. We are living in a moment where the collapse of thinking is so subtle, so quiet, so normalized that most people will never even notice it. But you can. You already have. And now that you see it, you have a choice. To go back to the noise or to walk forward into the silence, into the fire, into the terrifying and beautiful space of thought. Not just thinking more, but thinking better. Thinking for real. That's how we begin to remember who we are.